So I wanted to talk a little bit about something that you wrote on this week on your blog, but also something that you preached on before in a series of sermons, but about the worldview, the four aspects, four components of worldview. So
Right.
tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah, in the series of sermons, I talked about the four spokes of a worldview wheel, and they are catechesis, what we believe; narrative, the story we tell of ourselves as a people; symbol and ritual; and lifestyle, how we live day to day. So, two of the spokes are propositional. Stories are made up of propositions, and dogmatic affirmations, answers to catechism questions, are made up of propositions. So the first catechesis would be the Apostles' Creed. That's an affirmation. Christian, what do you believe? I believe this. This is a dogmatic affirmation. Narrative would be the history of your people. Having a map of church history that has an X on it that says you are here. These are your people. This is where you came from. So you've got some orientation to the flow of events over history. You know the story of your people. That's the narrative. Symbol would have to crosses on steeples and crosses on jewelry and baptism, Lord's Supper, symbol and ritual.
Pollock in your office.
What's that?
Jackson Pollock in your office.
Yes. Yep.
Not your office.
Not here. So you look behind the wall there, you might say Jackson Pollock is too orderly for my office. But you can. So, for example, it's interesting how many symbols we pick up in the civil realm, in religious realm. So, if I said I saw someone driving down the street in a Volvo and they had Birkenstock sandals, they got out at the Whole Foods place, and I think, do I have a pretty good idea who they voted for in the last election? That shows you the shaping, formative influence of symbols. So but everybody does this. Everybody with a worldview does this. So 4th of July parades, the Pledge of Allegiance is a ritual symbol. So that's a part of a worldview. Then lifestyle would be, why does virtually everybody in America have a green garden hose? Or we have kids that go to school in yellow buses. And that's a lifestyle sort of thing. Everybody has this shared experience. So I grew up in Maryland, going to school in a yellow school bus, when kids growing up in Oregon were going to school in yellow school buses at the same time. It's part of a shared lifestyle thing. Language, shared entertainment, movies that enter into the common discourse. That's all part of the shaping worldview. So you put those four things together, that constitutes a worldview, as opposed to what many Christians have come to think, that worldview is simply thoughts you think in your head. I can send my teenager to a Christian worldview camp for the summer, and they'll get a bunch of lessons, and they'll learn a bunch of stuff, all of which would be good, but that's just one spoke of the wheel. That's not the whole Christian worldview.
The worldview download.
Right.
Download the worldview.
Right.
So the four things again: catechesis, narrative, symbol, lifestyle.
Right.
And two being propositional, two being sort of inaction, kind of
right.
thing. Tell me a little bit about how the inspiration of NT Wright and that. Did you get that? Did you get that from his?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it inspiration so much as a shameless ripoff. I first came across that distinction in the New Testament, the people of God, and although I've got significant differences with Wright on Paul, I really enjoy his stuff on Jesus and the Gospels. And in New Testament, the people of God, he has a section where he lays out those as the four components of a worldview, and I thought that was quite striking. So I took those four things and made them spokes in a wheel. The wheel is my thing, not NT Wright's, but I gathered up the spokes from him.
And he has four elements, not three, right? I mean, just
he has four.
Right. And kind of transitioning from this a little bit into, I think, a very you wrote about this, and so I think it's a good transition. Talk about James Smith.
James K.A. Smith.
K.A. Smith, yeah. And the idea education as information and formation versus formation.
Yeah, James K. A. Smith has a recent book called Desiring the Kingdom, which I'm almost done with. And he says a number of things in there that are quite striking and marvelous and good and are right in line with things that we've emphasized over the years. One of the central driving things is that he emphasizes is that education is about shaping desire. It's not about stuffing your head full of facts. So shaping desire, hence the title, Desiring the Kingdom. I've talked about the same thing before. In fact, I think one of these video clips I talked about your job as parents or as teachers is not to get your kids to conform to the standard. Your job is to get the kids to love the standard. So I agree with him there, and he emphasizes strongly that education is formation, character formation, life, full-orbed, three-dimensional formation, not information. Right. So if you have kids in a Christian school who are taking notes, get scoring a 4 on their GPA, but they go off on their own and live like the devil, who needs that? We don't need that. We want a formation of godly Christian character, not simply information. The difficulty, the differences that I would have with Smith would not be there. I agree with him completely there. It would come out on what we would praise as the result of that formative education. So his idea of what the end product ought to look like and my idea would be very different. But I think he's dead on right about saying that education is full orbed. And so he's pushing against Worldview camp in 2 weeks. All you have to do is answer the catechesis questions right, and here's the Christian answer to this, and here's the Christian answer to that. He's kicking against that, pushing against that as he ought to. He wants to say it's more robust than that.
So would you want to go into a little bit what the difference in the formation?
Sure. He would describe himself as a Christian socialist, for example, or in one of the footnotes in the book, he says that evangelical Christians ought not to be so whipped up about homosexual marriage. That's not a big deal, so he comments on how conservative Christians get agitated about homosexual marriage, but they defend capitalism. And I would say, well, yeah, yeah, because the Bible teaches that we ought not to constrain lawful economic choices, ought not to be constrained by the state or by private robbers or whatever. Capitalism is required by thou shalt not steal. Right? If you take thou shalt not steal and you run it out into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, where the formation is going to occur, then I don't see the inconsistency. We oppose homosexual marriage because the Bible does. We oppose regulation of free market transactions because the Bible does. So I want students in a Christian school to not only learn Christian worldviews on free market, Christian worldview on free markets, and Christian worldview on sexual identity issues. I want them to live that way out in their day-to-day lives, which means that they are going to, as citizens and voters and that sort of thing, they're going to have something to say about homosexual agenda. They're going to vote in a particular way. So James Smith was sort of taking a shot at evangelical Christians at one of the places where I think they've actually distinguished themselves in having a robust, full-orbed, engaged approach to these things.
So we oppose all regulators from socialism or socialist type structures to Michael Moore.
Yes, right.
Just throw that out.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.